Welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. I'm Ani Anderson.
And I'm Brian Trzaskos. Join us as we explore the science
and art of trauma-sensitive somatic practices and tools.
Strengthen your practice as a coach, therapist, or holistic professional.
Master the art of motivating even the most challenging clients when you understand how to tap into and unlock your client's complete holistic intelligence.
If you want to learn the most cutting-edge, research-supported skills for personal and professional mastery, you've come to the right place. Let's get this conversation started.
Hi, and welcome to the Somatic Coaching Academy podcast. Hey there, Brian.
Hey, Ani, episode 55.
You feeling good?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about 55.
Okay. Me too.
All right.
What are we talking about today?
So this is a good topic. Well, they're all good topics, but this is an interesting one. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 ways that coaches oftentimes unknowingly re-traumatize their clients.
That's going to be a really helpful topic for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because I think if not all of these topics, we've been on the receiving side of some of these re-traumatizations, right? Because, we've had a lot of coaching in the past, right? We put ourselves in the water that our clients are in a lot of times, right? So we wanted to learn what it's been like to be coached and to be in different environments and to coach with different professionals and to coach with people that have different belief systems and stretching ourselves into places that aren't comfortable for us. Right, sort of thing. So we've learned a ton by working with lots of different coaches and business advisors and those sorts of folks.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our awareness around these topics, which are based in physiology, were also experienced by us.
Yeah, and we have actual credentials to back up the, expertise around it as well. The thing about, going through programs where re-traumatization has been a thing, I think that one of the benefits of knowing about this stuff is when things come up and I'm feeling re-traumatized in some capacity, I know that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with a lot of people, they don't know that's what's happening. And so they think there's a problem with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it can, like you said, unknowingly, the whole thing goes, to pass. And neither the coach or the coachee would have said, if they didn't know, that there was any re-traumatization because, the coachee just couldn't do it, or they, in some way were flawed in some way. And then the coachee goes ahead and takes it on, and off we go to the next client. And unknowingly, there was re-traumatization there. So there's this unknowing aspect that happens with the coach and with the client. So as we've been clients, we've been able to advocate for ourselves, caretake for ourselves, and have conversations with the coach or consultant or mentor or whatever where it happened, to be able to educate and really be good to ourselves and care for ourselves around those things, because we know. So I'm excited for this topic today so that people who are listening will have a healthier awareness, whether they're the coach or they're the coachee,
right,
to be able to advocate for a do no harm kind of professional experience.
Yeah. So let's maybe set the table here, because you might be listening to this podcast for the very first time.
Welcome.
And thanks, and welcome. Thanks for being here. And you might not realize that we have a whole bunch of podcasts that we've already done on trauma responses and how we think about trauma and what trauma is. But let's just maybe lay the table here for anybody who's kind of stepping in right here to maybe pick up and moving forward. So what is trauma? How do we think about it here at the Somatic Coaching Academy? Well, obviously something happened somewhere in the past that challenged a person's capacity to deal with it on multiple levels: psychologically, emotionally, and physiologically. So something happened in the past. And what is happening now is what we call an autonomic nervous system dysregulation. So it's a big phrase to basically say that your physiology gets knocked out of balance or re-knocked out of balance because of something that happens in the present moment. So a long time ago, something happened that created imbalance in a person's nervous system. And even though the event that caused the imbalance is in the past, the subconscious mind, since the subconscious mind is the nervous system and the nervous system is the subconscious mind, then, and by the way, nervous system isn't just your brain. It's your
Right.
spinal cord, it's your nerves, it's your enteric nervous system, it's in your gut. It's like your whole body is your nerve. Your nervous system reaches into your whole body. So when I say your nervous system, I mean your whole body. So something happened a long time ago, knocked your body nervous system out of balance. The event is in the past, but your subconscious mind has not fully integrated the experience. So on some level, your nervous system still retained some of that out of balanceness. We call that dysregulation. So some days you might feel relatively stable and regulated. Other days you might feel really stable and regulated. Some days you might feel really dysregulated. But what can happen is that when we're in a coaching relationship, because coaching is about growth, coaching is about stretching ourselves, coaching is about creating a different outcome in our lives, we're really basically challenging the current status of the nervous system. And so coaching will almost always create an opportunity for re-traumatization, no matter what kind of coaching it is. And I also will say that we cannot 100% ever always prevent re-traumatization. So that's another thing, right? It oftentimes will happen because of the way our nervous systems function. Now, a really highly qualified coach will do two things. They'll do whatever they can do to prevent re-traumatization, number one. And number two, if someone does get dysregulated or re-traumatized, then they'll know exactly what to do with it.
A trauma
A
sensitive
trauma
coach.
sensitive coach will be
Right.
able to do that,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but someone who's not trauma sensitive doesn't have awareness about it, they might not be aware of either one of those things. A
Absolutely.
coach that might not be aware that someone's nervous system has been chronically dysregulated from events way, way, way in the past. And they also may have no idea what to do with something when it comes up for people. So let's just kind of put that there. So hopefully, does that seem like it kind of lays the
Yeah.
groundwork for how we want to talk about the 5 kind of common ways that people
Yeah, I just want to add that
are traumatized?
90% of people or so, I think it's higher, are walking around with traumatized nervous systems. And so that statistic doesn't account for the fact that you were probably raised by someone who had a traumatized nervous system. So all of us have this in us, and it's not a conversation where we can say, I'm going to opt out. Because if we work with people, we work
Mhm.
with nervous systems. And if we work with nervous systems, we all work with traumatized nervous systems.
Yeah. So let's talk about the things that happen that can re-traumatize a nervous system, right? Or bring back to the surface an old pattern that was set up a long time ago, and that pattern has a part of it nervous system dysregulation.
Great.
It's another way we can kind of think about it.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the common ways, I think probably one of the most common ways that non-trauma trained coaches will re-traumatize their clients is that when their client meets resistance, they'll just tell them to push through it.
Mm-hmm.
They'll say, push through the pain, push through the fear. You just have to push through it. Keep pushing. Don't be a baby. Like, keep working. You got to just do it. Just do it. I don't care if you vomit on the way to doing it. Like, you
Yeah.
got to do it.
I, I've heard I've heard that one a number of times and rolling my eyes as you're saying it out loud. Also, one way I see this show up is not addressing resistance as a part of the change process at all. So I recently was talking with a colleague who's working with a coach, and I said, "How's it going?" And she said, okay, but they keep telling me things to do. And honestly, I've already got so much on my plate. I'm not really doing the things." And I thought it was interesting because there was no conversation about the resistance that is going to be a part of the change process. There actually wasn't even an acknowledgement that creating new habits in our lives requires our subconscious to change. And so that wasn't even a part of the
Mm.
conversation at all. So I think that this idea of like pushing through can also show up as not acknowledging that that's even a part of the change process.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That the resistance is a natural part of it.
Yeah, and fear is also a
Mm.
big one. And listen, we hear this on Instagram and whatever in the news and all over the place. Like if you're afraid of something, that's where you should leap. There's some truth to that. And from a standpoint of re-traumatization, there's ways to be able to expand the window of tolerance and grow into change that is safe and allows the person to do it without, like you were saying, like breaking something.
Yep. Yeah.
Breaking could be the body. You get to the place where you've done your thing, you've leapt off of the proverbial cliff, but your body is broken and exhausted. You can break relationships on the way. That happens all the time, a lot. And other kind of in the wake of the disaster that was being pushed through.
Yeah. So it's really important for a person to know what their own, like what we say, window of tolerance is. So everyone has a window or a degree of variability that the nervous system will be able to tolerate when it comes to experiencing change. Some people have a really narrow window. Some people have a really wide window. You have to know what it, and there's no judgment on any of that. Like, doesn't matter if you have a narrow,
Everybody's
you have to know
different.
what yours is.
Yeah, know thyself.
Know thyself. Because the problem is that when a coach kind of pushes a client outside of their window of tolerance too far, what can happen is they can stay then dysregulated for a really long period of time. So idea of when someone's operating inside of their window of tolerance, their nervous system is generally regulated. When they're outside of the window of tolerance, their nervous system is dysregulated. Now, if someone goes outside of the window of tolerance a little bit and then comes back in, that's actually okay. I mean, that's actually grows resilience. That's a good thing. But if they get kicked too far out of their window of tolerance and they can't get back in again, that's technically a re-traumatization. So by pushing someone way far outside of their nervous system regulation zone, that creates issues where then the person is in a dysregulated state, which can be all kinds of things with dissociation and shutdown or complete manic kind of freaking out. Like a lot of things can happen. Go back to past podcasts and find out more about what are the signs of nervous system dysregulation. But when someone gets pushed too far out of that window, they can't get back in. That's technically a re-traumatization.
Yeah. So if you're looking at working with a coach and you're asking them kind of about how they go about creating the changes for their clients, if
Mm-hmm.
you're talking with somebody who has this like massive action kind of philosophy, more typically that person is not a trauma sensitive practitioner. Of course, you can always ask them if they have trauma sensitive training. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
idea.
Yeah.
But that massive action, just leap off a cliff kind of thing, is usually we're not taking into
Right.
consideration
Yeah.
people's nervous
Yeah.
systems.
And we do want to just say here too is that trauma sensitive coaches are not soft on trauma either.
Mhm.
Right. So it's not like we're saying, oh, well, don't do it then. It's okay.
It's
Don't stretch.
okay.
We're not doing that either. A trauma sensitive professional will know exactly the right amount of stretch for someone to go to both grow their nervous system without causing
And
dysregulation.
they could
So
they
that's the skill of being trained as a trauma sensitive coach, right?
absolutely absolutely, and they also know how to modify the sensations so that people can actually create modification internally
Right.
as they're moving forward with those new actions.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So the first way of our five of ways that coaches unknowingly re-traumatize their clients is they just push through it. That's number one. Okay.
We
Number
counting backwards or we counting forward?
I don't
We're
know.
doing
I
like
don't know.
five, four,
It's
three,
not
two,
really a
one.
countdown. It's just
Okay.
kind of this.
All right.
Here's the top
All
five.
right. So number two.
Okay. Number two.
Okay.
So number two is is when a coach. So say a client comes with an issue that they're dealing with. And maybe it's an issue about how they're approaching something, or it could be how they feel about something, or it could be the way that they're perceiving something. And the coach just tells them how to fix it.
That's not coaching. That's not actually coaching.
Right. But coaches do that.
Right.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah. They just tell them how
People
to
who call themselves
say,
coaches do
this is
that.
what you need to do. Like, This is what you got to do. A, B, and C. Just fix it. Do this to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And so why is that technically your traumatization? Why does that show up that way? Well,
Oh.
lots of people who have experienced past trauma, whether it's been on a large degree or a small degree, it's all in degrees. And there's a pattern of dysregulation in the nervous system. And those patterns can come up over time for people. And, it's interesting. I've worked with clients who at work, they're like rock stars, right? They're
Oh,
like, they
yeah.
can just show up at work, but then they go home, and in their home, they can barely keep it together. And so you never know, in certain environments can activate people in different ways, sort of thing. And for some other people, it's the opposite. Home is their rock stars, and at work they can't, they're dysregulated constantly. So it can happen in all kinds of ways for folks. So there's no judgment around any of that. But what can happen is that, say you're a rock star at home, but then every time you go to work, you have a hard time keeping it together. You can really come up with this idea that you're broken, that there's something wrong. There must be something wrong with me, that I can't do this. There must be something wrong with me. So when working with a coach, and a coach just coming out and telling someone how to fix something, what that can do is bring to the surface, because a fix, right? We fix things that are broken.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's what we
Yeah.
do. Like,
Right.
if something's broken, fix it. If something's broken, fix it. I mean, that's basically how it works in our society. So just using the terminology and the
Yeah.
approach of this is how you fix it can unearth a pattern of
I'm
I'm
broken.
broken within somebody. And that
Yeah.
unbroken becomes that re-traumatization that then comes to the surface. That can be very shameful for someone,
Yeah.
can feel very humiliating, just by the direct approach of, if you haven't been able to figure this out for yourself, there must be something wrong with you, because it's very clear to me this is how you're going to fix it. It
Yeah.
can bring up so much for people.
It can. And the coach E who does have a traumatized nervous system will oftentimes really just take that I'm broken on and oof. Yeah. Yeah. It just keeps perpetuating.
Yeah. And so no one's broken.
Yeah.
The thing is, actually, your nervous system is working perfectly. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. There's all kinds of signals and switches that have to happen to help us survive and to help us stay safe.
Hmm.
And lots of times that's what's happening when we have a nervous system dysregulation episode.
Yeah, when we say no one's broken, we're coming from a physiological homeostasis kind of balance kind of thing. It's not just some like nice thing that we say. No one's broken. It's actually from a physiological homeostasis
Mm.
perspective, the body's always in a dynamic balance.
Hmm.
And so you really actually are not, you're yeah, your body's working perfectly.
Yep. All right. So that's number two. Like, not
Oh, it's
again,
a really good one.
not in a hierarchical order at all.
Yeah.
That's just the number on our
Yeah,
on
sure.
our list here. Okay. So the number three way that coaches tend to re-traumatize their clients, oftentimes unknowingly, is by not getting consent,
Mm-hmm.
not receiving consent from people.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remember that the origination of trauma, one of the key features of all trauma, any trauma that anyone's ever experienced, one of the
Lack of
key
consent.
features is loss of choice.
Yeah.
Like, we
Yep.
didn't actually choose to have that experience. Whether that's again, I don't want to go into any of the details around
Whatever
around trauma, but
it
whatever
is.
trauma anyone's ever experienced, if you go back to it, you have to realize, oh my God, so really what happened was I didn't have choice around that.
Yeah. It's such a again, going back to like trauma sensitive work isn't soft work. So you'll hear our trauma sensitive coaches asking all the time for consent all throughout the course
Yeah.
of a night once.
Not just once.
Not once,
Yeah.
all throughout the course of their program. And it's not soft at all. The client super appreciates it. It creates a tremendous amount of rapport and connection. It really allows the person to maybe even for the first time recognize that they truly are in choice and the other person actually is holding space for whatever they choose
Hmm.
to be okay. It's a tremendously powerful, important relationship.
Yeah. Ongoing consent. So in the systems that we teach, we have it baked into the systems and the processes that points of ongoing consent to go through, because it actually does something for the nervous system and the subconscious mind as well, right?
Yeah.
To really help that. So there's that choice piece is just, it's critically important.
And whatever they choose needs to actually be
Yeah,
okay. I think that
exactly.
one of the things that stands in the way of a coach being able to be in that space with the client is the coach needs to actually be able to detach from their getting their self-worth because the client's quote unquote successful.
Right. Yeah.
Because in the moment that you really do truly give your client consent and you really are okay, truly okay with whatever it is that they choose, you need to it could bring up some stuff for
Yeah.
you as the coach, and you need to be able to detach from what you think might be the wrong answer.
Yep.
Quick example.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
I remember we were in class one time and years ago, and we were working with a student and we were talking about this exact thing about choice, and we were workshopping it. And the student wanted to work on the fact that they couldn't get themselves to stop watching television so much. They watch television so much and they shouldn't watch television so much. And they should be doing this and they should be doing that. I should be cleaning my house and I should be exercising and blah, 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 blah. And I don't remember the exact conversation, but we got to the place where the choice point came and the student chose later in the day to actually watch television, which paradoxically looks like they're going to do the dysfunctional behavior. But what actually the magic point was that we gave conscious consent to the client. They consciously chose in that moment. I remember we got off the call and I immediately got a direct message from another student going, I don't get it. She made the wrong choice. She was supposed to go exercise. Why'd you let her get away with that? And there's some kind of thing in the coaching industry about how we're supposed to be, not all the time, but it can be. We're supposed to be badasses and we're supposed to, like, you know, coach, go, 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 or whatever. And I explained the concept of consent at that moment to the student, and she also had a traumatized nervous system, really appreciated it again, hearing it again. Oh, okay. And we got to be curious together to see what would happen next. So that curiosity to see what would happen next allowed us to then again be open when the student came back and described what happened next for her, and she was able to really move through that trajectory to change pretty big things in her life. But that was a pivotal moment. It was not only really pivotal for her as the coachee, but this other people watching were like, that wasn't the right answer. There's no right answer.
Right. Yeah. And so leading with that consent and choice made a consciously, I love what you said about that, Ani, right? The conscious choice
Conscious.
actually changed how the behavior
100%.
ended up, what it ended up bringing or resulting in, right?
Yeah, because she was
Yep.
making an unconscious choice to watch television more than she wanted to. It was not a conscious choice. It
Mhm.
was just her default. And
Yep.
then she made the conscious choice and something changed.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love these conversations because they go into these interesting little sidebars that are so incredibly valuable, right? That's a
Yeah.
great, hugely valuable. Okay, so what's the next one? So number four. So the number four way is when and I have to say, I have been guilty of this. Like actually, this mistake that I made is the one that changed my life. Um, and I still am sometimes wrestle with this one particularly that I did.
What is it?
And so here's what it is. When a coach opens up an issue for a client that then they cannot handle and deal with.
That happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually that happened so profoundly for me that I opened up an issue for a client and it created so much dysregulation. So this is before I was trauma informed, trauma sensitive trained. And I opened up because I thought, oh, I know about trauma. And when what I knew about trauma, what I thought I knew about trauma was let's release the trauma. Right? That's what I knew. That's what I knew. It's like,
Popping a
oh,
balloon.
here's the trauma.
Yeah.
Let's release it.
Yeah. Well,
And so I was really good
yeah.
at probing questions and doing manual work with people
Uh-huh.
to release trauma.
Yeah.
But then once it was released,
Yeah.
I had no clue how to help support
Now
my
what?
client around it.
Yeah.
And it was so devastating for me,
Yeah.
the harm that I caused this person.
Yeah.
And thank God she was helpful to me in understanding what had happened
Uh-huh.
because she could reflect that back to me. But that changed my life. And I realized I never, ever, 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 ever want that ever to happen to anybody ever again that I
Yeah.
work with. And I never want anybody else professionally to have to deal with that ever again or at all for
Yeah.
someone that they work with.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided to just go all in on really getting deeply trauma trained,
Uh-huh.
trauma informed, trauma sensitive, trauma specific trained, because I realized if I'm going to wade into these waters of somatic coaching more deeply, then I have to really be able to support whatever comes up for somebody and then refer out if I can't support, but I have to still be able to do first aid for somebody if something happens in a
Right.
situation. Right.
Yeah.
Even if I'm not doing ongoing care or support for somebody, I have to
Yeah.
at least do first aid when stuff comes up because again, a lot of dysfunctional behaviors and challenging and difficult behaviors that people have are being driven by trauma responses.
Yeah.
So when we address the trauma responses, that's how we can change those behaviors, right? So as Ani pointed out, if you're working with people, and especially if you're working with people in an embodied way, in a somatic way, whether you're doing that with somatic practices or whether you're doing with somatic coaching, you are there's a great possibility that someone will become dysregulated or traumatized, and you have got to know how to manage it.
Okay, I've got three examples. Two of them are
Yep.
pretty quick. So one is that if you are doing, like you said, any somatic practices with people, you've got to understand you could be opening Pandora's box. I recently was doing some coaching on an app. I'm working on sleeping better. And they were doing some somatic practices. I know what I'm doing. It actually dysregulated my nervous system, but I knew what I was doing and I could handle it and go from there. And the app is fantastic, by the way. And they were doing somatic practices. The somatic practices dysregulated me. There was no support for that.
Hmm.
So that was one. Shoot, I thought if I said three, I'd be able to remember them all. Now I don't remember the second one. I wanted to point out in your story that you were working with people's tissue. So this was before you would have called yourself a coach. You were calling yourself a manual therapist. You were practicing manual physical therapy. And so you said something important in your story. You said you were asking questions.
Yep.
And asking questions is actually a function of coaching. And so asking questions is something that other professionals do, which is one of the reasons why we really like to talk about. We're not in the business to like make a million somatic coaches. We want to give people somatic coaching skills because a lot of practitioners ask
Hmm.
people questions. Doctors ask people questions, nurses ask people questions, manual therapists ask people questions. So if you're a person who's working in somebody's body and you're asking people questions, then you have the possibility of opening up this box.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't remember the third one, but that was enough.
Okay. All right. So that's a really common way to, I mean, all these are common ways, but that one for me strikes home. So when you open up something that then you can't deal with, boy, that is really can be really re-traumatizing for people.
Yeah. And if you're not going to be a trauma sensitive practitioner yourself, you really have to have a referral network with
Yep.
people who know how to handle things.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. So the last way that we see coaches tend to re-traumatize people is kind of like this toxic positivity spin that can happen. Right. So a client is really struggling with something. They're maybe already a bit dysregulated. Something came up. And it could be something really important, like a big, like they lost a parent, right? Or someone passed away,
Mm-hmm.
or they maybe lost their job, or maybe they got a health diagnosis. Like so oftentimes it's a important thing. And so someone gets a health diagnosis, they bring it to their coach or to somebody else, and they say, well,
Think on the bright
there's
side.
positive. I think in the bright side, there's something positive here. Like, well,
There's an
this is the
opportunity
positive
around
thing.
every
Now you don't
silver
have to go to
lining.
work anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so that toxic positivity spin, it actually says a little bit more about the coach than the client.
Yeah.
And what it says about the coach is that they're not able to be with trauma. They're
Yeah.
not able to be with it.
Yeah, it actually sends a it actually means that the coach is coming from a place of toleration rather than win-win opportunities. Because a person who's going to put a positive spin on something that really needs to be addressed, like you said, knows there's something deeper in there subconsciously, I think. And it's a sign that you're coming from a place of toleration in your own life, actually. So
Hmm.
that's something interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And the other way that it really kind of can seep into this re-traumatization is it really completely invalidates the way a person's feeling.
Yeah.
Right. So someone's like really kind of feeling into the upset or whatever it is. And someone says, oh, well, think on the bright side. You're just completely invalidating someone else's experience.
Everybody processes things differently. I have clients who really need to go into the emotional process that's happening with them. I have clients who need to like dip their toes in, and I have clients who kind of just like eh, keep going. And each person is different in how they're going to process
Mm-hmm.
things. Um, so yeah, the toxic positivity. I mean, and we get so much of it from everywhere in the media. I think that it really can be challenging for us to allow ourselves to have a self-compassion if that's how we process things. And it's not just big things, by the way. It's well, it's any degree of things that matter to the person. I'm thinking about a client who I saw who, Brian, they were going through their children. It was a natural progression, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Their children were going from being kids to being teenagers, and the person was experiencing grief around that, and they were for themselves trying to make themselves think positively about it. I'm going to have more time on my hands now, I can explore things that I like to do. And so that's the when they came to the session, they were telling me about, what do you want to work on? I said, and whatever they told me, and I'm thinking more positive about it and all of this stuff. Well, it didn't take long for me to say something like, hey, let's talk about this or that, or I heard a catch in your voice, or what was that? It doesn't feel like you're taking a nice deep breath or whatever. There was a lot of grief underneath there. And the person told me, the client told me, like, no one's really given me the space to acknowledge that this is really, really sad for me. I've given 18 years of my life dedicated to serving my family and growing these relationships with these children. And now they're leaving and I'm scared. And all of the things that went into that, and just acknowledging that, not just acknowledging the grief, being able to listen, witness, validate,
Mm-hmm.
allowed the person to come to a place where they could find opportunity. But it wasn't even about that, but it really was like this lovely place. You know what it reminds me of? My favorite movie, Inside Out.
Mm-hmm.
How, in order to create true connection with people, it's not just happiness that we need to be able to do that. It's our sadness, it's our grief, it's our ability to show up and be vulnerable and to be seen by another person who can then reach out and connect with us. That's what creates depth and connection to really help us to feel human and connected with other human beings. So all of our emotions are important. Inside Out will tell you that's true.
That's right. If it's Inside Out said it, then it
If
must be true.
Pixar said it, it must
Must be
be true.
true. So it really, again, what we love to kind of help our students learn how to do is to meet people where they are. And so we're not saying that a positive reframing at some point in time isn't valuable.
Yeah.
It actually is valuable, but it's all about timing. It's about meeting people, which you just said so eloquently, it's about meeting people where they are and then helping to walk with them, as a guide, helping to guide them and walk with them to a place of resolution within themselves. And they've already have the resolution within them, right?
Yeah.
We already have everything that we need within ourselves.
Coaching will tell us
Coaching
that.
would tell us that. We just have to be able to guide them to that resolution. And like jumping too fast to the positivity spin that we stick on somebody invalidates their current experience, and it also invalidates their capacity to find the resolution within themselves. And that's re-traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah. All of these are really important. And I'm so glad we're having the conversation. It's so fantastic to be able to have more people recognize
Mm-hmm.
that that's what's really going on. I think it helps us to be kinder. It certainly helps us to get better results with people. It
Yeah.
helps us to really make a profound difference. And I think the ripple effects that we see with our clients and their families and the people that they serve with their work and things like that are just so profoundly transformative.
Yeah. Yeah. So watch for these 5 ways, learn how to address them, and becoming more of trauma sensitive coach and provider can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're ready to embark in becoming trauma sensitive practitioner, then our certification programs are definitely where you want to look, because we do a lot of that work in those certification programs.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
thanks for joining us for this conversation.
All right. See you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope that this conversation will help you improve your practice and change the way you think about your work, your clients, and yourself.
Continue your exploration of trauma-sensitive somatic coaching by listening to more podcast episodes at somaticcoachingacademy.com. You could be the trusted guide that people turn to help them with their most challenging situations and to reach their most precious goals. Thank you for joining us.
We'll see you next time.